The band played its usual energetic rhythm as the opening credits of The Tonight Show rolled across millions of screens. Cameras panned across a glowing stage bathed in cobalt and gold, where Jimmy Fallon stood center frame, all smiles and rhythm, clapping along to the beat. "Tonight," he grinned, "we've got a legend in the house." The crowd cheered. "Keanu Reeves is here." A roar. Applause. Some even stood. Keanu walked out from the wings with that familiar, humble gait, hands together, a half bow, head slightly dipped, as if to thank the moment rather than absorb it. He wore a charcoal blazer over a black tee, boots worn just enough to speak of, years rather than fashion. The light sparkled around him, but he moved like a man used to shadows. He hugged Fallon briefly, then sat. The cheers faded into the rhythm of the show. "How are you, man?" Fallon beamed. "You look good. I feel like you've been frozen in time, like literally, is this John Wick skincare?" Laughter. Keanu smiled, authentically warmly, but it came and went like a passing cloud. "I moisturize with sorrow," he replied dryly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Fallon cracked up along with the crowd, but the smirk didn't reach his eyes. Jimmy jumped in. "You've been doing press, right? For your new film?" Keanu nodded, fingers resting gently on the armrest. "Yeah, it's been a journey." There was a slight pause between being and a journey. Enough space for something unsaid. The conversation rolled forward. Late-night momentum didn't leave much room for silence. Fallon asked about motorcycles. Keanu answered. "A stunt gone wrong," they joked. "The Matrix?" A fan theory got thrown in. Fallon played a clip. Keanu laughed, then politely explained a scene. His body moved with ease, like a man who'd been here before. But now and then, when Fallon looked down at his cue cards, Keanu's gaze drifted. Not to the audience, not to the band, but inward. A cutaway showed the audience smiling, laughing, eating it all up. But on Keanu's face, if one looked close, enough was something else. Something that lingered at the edges of his smile, like a quiet memory humming beneath a piano's last note. Jimmy leaned in. "Man, you've always had this stillness to you, you know? Like everyone else is on caffeine and you're just floating." Keanu let the compliment rest for a moment. "Stillness is where the pain sits," he said, his voice barely above the studio hum. "You can only hear it when everything else gets quiet." Fallon blinked. "Damn, I wasn't ready for philosophy night." Laughter again, light and harmless. Keanu chuckled too, but he didn't backtrack. There was a beat of silence, short but present. Jimmy pivoted. "So, okay, let's talk about fans. Do you ever get weird stuff? Like someone naming a dog after you? Or tattoos?" Keanu nodded, smiling again. "Yeah, a guy once showed me a tattoo of me holding a puppy, and he named his cat Neo." Fallon laughed. The crowd erupted. As the laughter died down, Keanu's eyes flickered toward the edge of the audience, where the lights fell, into shadows. Something about the way he glanced, slow, deliberate, made it feel like he wasn't looking at anything outside of himself. Jimmy reached for a mug, sipping. "Do you ever think about it? The fame, the legacy, the way people just love you?" That question lingered. Keanu's fingers curled slightly around the edge of his seat. His shoulders straightened subtly. He looked at Fallon, not dodging the question, not embracing it either. "I think about people," he said. "Not what they think of me, but who they are underneath everything." Fallon raised a brow. "Meaning?" Keanu inhaled, his voice slowing as if choosing every word with reverence. "I met this kid once on a set. His name was David. He had cancer. He asked me if I thought heaven had time. Not wings, not clouds. Just time." The studio hushed. Not in drama, but in something quieter. Respect, maybe. Or instinct. "What did you say?" Fallon asked, his voice softening. "I didn't know how to answer," Keanu admitted, his eyes fixed not on Fallon, but slightly above the camera's line. "So I asked him what he thought." Fallon leaned in. What did he say? He said, "If heaven has time, then I can see my dad again, because that's all I ever wanted. One more hour." The studio was still. Keanu looked down, fingers drumming lightly. He passed a month later. I never forgot him, or that sentence. Jimmy took a breath. You've got a way of dropping these soul punches, man." Keanu half smiled, but something in his throat tightened. His voice dropped again. "Some things deserve silence." There it was, a shift, not dramatic, not loud, but felt. A camera moved. Slightly. An assistant producer off stage stopped mid-note. Even Fallon didn't quite know how to steer it back. He gestured lightly, giving the moment a beat longer than normal. It was too early in the show for this kind of emotional gravity. But, too honest to cut short. Keanu adjusted in his seat, not fidgeting, just grounding himself. He looked at Fallon, then into the audience. "I know people expect me to be Keanu, but truthfully, I'm just trying to be a decent man who happens to be visible." A woman in the crowd nodded slowly. Another wiped her cheek. Jimmy smiled. Not the show smile, but a real one. "We're glad you are, man." The music began to fade in. The show would move on. But in that moment, the tone had changed. Not completely. Just enough. Enough to make people lean forward. Enough to make them wonder. As the camera panned out and Fallon teed up the next segment, Keanu's eyes wandered again, to that quiet space beyond the lights, a space that held stories. And one sentence that hadn't yet been spoken. The stage lights softened, casting warm halos across the studio. The laughter from the last segment still echoed faintly, but it had thinned, like smoke after a firework. Jimmy Fallon leaned forward, cue cards in hand, smiling the way only he could. Polished, friendly, always moving the current forward. "So, Keanu," Fallon grinned, "you've kind of become this accidental meme legend. The "you're breathtaking" thing, the Subway Gentleman video. That Reddit thread where everyone calls you the nicest guy in Hollywood." He paused for laughter, and the audience gave it to him. Keanu smiled too, tilting his head modestly. "Yeah, I guess I've been memed into sainthood." Fallon laughed, clapping his hand on the desk. "Right? I mean, does that ever get weird? Being the internet's spiritual uncle?" Keanu chuckled, the sound light but distant. "It's flattering, I guess, but people see a moment and turn it into a myth. I'm not that myth, I'm just present sometimes." Jimmy's eyebrows lifted. He wasn't sure if it was a joke or a reflection. He pivoted slightly. Okay, so let's talk career. Matrix 4. John Wick 6. You're in this renaissance. Does it feel different now than when you were younger? Keanu leaned back, fingertips beating like a bridge. "Yeah, when I was young, I ran toward roles. Now I wait to see if they whisper back." Fallon blinked, surprised. "That's deep." Keanu offered a half smile. "So's life if you stop long enough." That got a murmur from the audience, an almost involuntary sound, as if a thought had moved through them like wind through leaves. Jimmy laughed, slightly nervous now. "Man, you're like a Zen koan in boots." Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the desk, almost studying the wood grain. When he spoke next, his voice slowed, not for drama, but from care. "You asked about legacy earlier." Fallon nodded, leaning in instinctively. Keanu's eyes didn't lift. Most people think legacy is applause, roles remembered. But the loudest echoes come from the quietest things. He finally looked up, his gaze landing not just on Jimmy, but beyond him, into the darkened audience, the camera, the void between fame and truth. "I think of a man named Guillermo." Fallon tilted his head, curious. "An actor?" Keanu shook his head. "A janitor. Back when I was starting out in Toronto. I was 19, broke, living out of a rental car half the time. I used to sweep floors in the studio between readings." Guillermo mopped. A ripple of silence crept into the room, not heavy, but attentive. "He barely spoke English," Keanu continued. "But every morning he'd bring 2 coffees, one for him, one for me. Never asked if I wanted it, just gave it." Keanu paused, his voice thinner now. "After a few weeks, I asked him why, He said, "Because you never looked down on me." Jimmy exhaled slowly. The audience leaned in. Keanu's fingers tapped the desk once, then stilled. I asked him once what he dreamed of. He said, "My daughter becomes doctor. I become memory." His lips parted slightly. He died 3 years later. Heart attack. In the break room. Still had his mop leaning against the wall. The studio had grown so quiet, even the overhead lights seemed respectful. Fallon cleared his throat. "You still think about him?" Keanu nodded. "Every time I walk into a studio, every time someone calls me sir, because there's always someone like Guillermo just beyond the light." Jimmy folded his cue cards gently. Wow. The band, sensing the shift, didn't play. The cameras panned closer. Keanu adjusted, slightly in his seat, as if trying to shift something inside himself. "There was another person," he said. "A boy named Aaron. I met him on the set of Chain Reaction. He had leukemia, 12 years old. Make-A-Wish kid. Wanted to see a stunt sequence." Fallon's eyes widened. "I've heard about those moments." Keanu smiled faintly. He was bright. Wore this oversized hoodie with stars on it. Had questions for everyone. Gripped my hand like he was anchoring himself to the earth. He stopped again, the memory pulling at his voice. "We talked during lunch. He said he wanted to be a scientist. Said he believed in time travel." Keanu's eyes glistened. Not with tears, but the shimmer of something raw being held back. He asked me, "Do you think time slows down in heaven?" The words hung in the air. Jimmy didn't speak. No one did. "I told him maybe," Keanu said, his voice smaller now. And he smiled like I'd given him permission to imagine a longer forever. Fallon finally whispered, "Did he make it?" Keanu nodded, barely. "A few more weeks. His mom sent me a letter. Said he'd hung the photo of us by his bed." A single sniffle echoed from the audience. Fallon opened his mouth, perhaps to change the subject, but Keanu leaned forward. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked, soft but direct. Jimmy blinked, caught in the current. "Of course." Keanu sat back, exhaling. "This isn't a celebrity story. It's not funny. It won't go viral, but it's true." His voice found rhythm, not like a performance, but like confession. "There was a man I met once at a gas station in Nevada. I was on a solo road trip, trying to outrun myself. I wore a hoodie, kept my head down. I just lost someone, and didn't want to be Keanu Reeves. I just wanted to disappear." He rubbed his palms together, a subtle tick of memory. The pump wasn't working. He came over, attendant guy, about 50, smelled like diesel and cologne. Didn't recognize me. He just said, "A rough day." Keanu smiled at the memory, sad and amused. I said, "Yeah." He nodded, handed me a water bottle and said, "Then don't let it be a wasted one." A beat. That stuck with me. I didn't ask for wisdom, didn't ask for kindness, but he gave it anyway. No camera, no name, just a moment between strangers. Fallon didn't try to respond this time. He let the words sink. Keanu turned to the audience now, not theatrically, but gently. "We celebrate people for being seen. But most of the people who save us, they never get seen." There it was, that shift, like a soft tremor beneath polished stone. In the quiet that followed, Jimmy finally leaned in, not with a question, but a truth. "You've got a lot of stories, man." Keanu looked down, then back up. "I have a lot of ghosts." No music followed, just the hum of reverence, and the stillness that only truth can bring. The cameras were still rolling, but it felt like they weren't. The rhythm of the show had shifted, slower now, reverent. Even the band, usually quick with cue chords and light background buzz, sat idle in respectful quiet. The room had become something else, not a studio, not a stage. Something softer, like a memory being built in real time. Keanu's fingers gently traced the rim of the mug in front of him, his eyes distant, as if pulling something out from a place long buried. Not forgotten, just folded carefully away. "There was a boy," Keanu said, voice low, clear. Fallon nodded, leaning forward instinctively, sensing the moment before it declared itself. "His name was Elijah. I met him while shooting The Lake House. A friend of a crew member brought him to the set. He was 10. Had these big, unfiltered eyes, like he was still discovering the shape of the world. But he had the kind of stillness most adults never learn. He paused, breathing in slowly. He had cancer. Stage 4. His mother told me he used to watch The Matrix during chemo to feel strong. She said he believed Neo could dodge anything, even time. Keanu's voice tightened. Not choked, not cracked, just, smaller. We sat under a lighting rig. I offered him my chair and he gave me this folded, handmade letter. Said he wrote it the night before. Blue paper, stars drawn in, pencil. In the middle he'd written, "Do you think heaven has time?" Jimmy's eyebrows gently furrowed, lips parted. Keanu didn't look at him. His gaze drifted toward the audience but didn't land on anyone. He was looking inward. "I didn't know how to answer," he said. "I think I said something. Like I hope so." But he shook his head, smiled, and said, "Because if heaven has time, then it can wait for my mom." A gasp, soft, involuntary, passed through the studio like wind slipping between cracks. He passed away 2 months later. Keanu looked down at his hands. "I still have that letter. The folds are worn now. I keep it in a book I never finished reading." Silence expanded again, respectful and heavy. Fallon blinked quickly and sat back in his chair, absorbing. He had no cards left. No prepared questions that would land softly after this. Keanu continued, voice gentler now, like the story was carrying him rather than the other way around. "Sometimes I think about applause," he said. "About how we give it to moments. Speeches, actors, but not always to the ones who fight invisible wars." The camera zoomed in slowly, like it was afraid to disturb the gravity of the moment. Elijah's mother wrote to me years later. Said she found him whispering to his pillow once. Said he wasn't praying. He was telling heaven to take its time. A woman in the front row wiped beneath her eye. She wasn't alone. Jimmy sat forward again, clasping his hands. "You've carried that for a long time," he said quietly. Keanu nodded. "Some things carry you." Jimmy hesitated, then asked what felt like a dangerous question, one that could either break the spell or pull something even deeper into the light. "Keanu, what do you say to people who think you're just lucky?" The pause that followed wasn't hesitation. It was weight. Keanu's eyes dropped. He took a slow breath, eyes closing just for a second. A twitch of the jaw, not anger. Something else. Grief, gratitude, reflection. He opened his mouth and said nothing at first, just placed his hand softly on the desk in front of him. Then he spoke. One sentence. But we didn't hear it. Not yet. Instead, the camera focused on Fallon's face, his eyes widening slightly, lips parting in stunned silence. He leaned back slowly, expression unreadable but undeniably moved. The studio audience didn't react right away. It took a moment, then a ripple, eyes moistening, hands covering mouths, people shifting in their seats like something invisible had passed through them. The sentence hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. Fallon didn't respond, couldn't. The lights above seemed to dim imperceptibly. Or perhaps it was the moment stealing attention from everything else. The director in the booth whispered through the headset, "Hold, just hold." Keanu sat still, his expression soft and steady, like he hadn't just cracked something wide open but simply told the truth. The camera stayed there, unmoving, for just a few seconds longer than was comfortable. And in those seconds, television became something else. It became human. There was a breath before it happened. Not the kind that fills lungs, but the kind that hangs between silence and sound. That invisible space where something sacred waits, unspoken, untouched. Keanu leaned slightly, forward, his hands resting lightly on his thighs, his posture calm yet composed. The studio, usually so full of laughter, applause, anticipation, felt paused, like it had been asked to listen for the first time in its life. Jimmy Fallon had asked him a question, something casual, innocent even. "What keeps you grounded?" Keanu's eyes had dropped slightly just for a moment. Then he raised them again, slow, deliberate. This time, he didn't smile. "I met a man," Keanu began, his voice quieter than usual. "He cleaned floors at a television studio, wore the same scuffed sneakers every day, said little, laughed less. But every night he went home and studied accounting, because he wanted to help his daughter open her own business one day." The studio listened, breath held. Not because it had to, but because something told it this matters. "He never took a sick day," Keanu continued. "Never asked for recognition. He just showed up." A small swallow passed down his throat, and then, "I met a man who cleaned floors so his daughter could live, and no one ever clapped for him. But he's the real star." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't emphasized, but the air changed, like a current running through unseen wires. A piano string humming in a quiet room. A story that stepped off its stage and into someone's soul. Jimmy Fallon didn't respond. Not at first. He stared, hands clasped, leaning back slightly, blinking as if trying to register not the sentence but the weight of it. A woman in the third row blinked back tears she hadn't noticed forming. Her hand rose slow to her cheek. The cameraman, usually steady, shifted ever so slightly. Behind the glass, a producer paused in their cue signaling. The floor manager, always so precise, lowered her arm and just watched. Even the band, instinctively ready to cue soft transitional music, sat in stillness. Keanu didn't speak again right away. He simply sat in the truth of what he'd said. Not a performance, not a quote, just a memory turned into legacy. Murmur moved through the crowd. Not noise, but emotion rippling, collective and silent. The kind of moment television was never meant to hold, but somehow had. Jimmy finally exhaled, his voice fragile. That's really something." Keanu looked at him, not with pride, not even sorrow, just presence. "It's easy," he said, "to mistake applause for meaning. But some people spend their whole lives doing meaningful things, and no one ever hears them." Someone in the back sniffled quietly. Keanu turned toward the audience, not to perform, not to stir, but to connect. "I don't know how many of you have someone like that in your life. Someone who disappears into the background so you can stand." The light, people started to nod. A man near the aisle closed his eyes briefly. A woman clasped her hands tighter in her lap. Keanu's voice, though still soft, had taken on the timbre of something ancient, like the echo of a bell rung far away. "My mother was like that. She worked late shifts sewing clothes so I could audition for things I didn't even believe I'd get. She never asked what I brought home, just whether I was okay. That's what love looks like. Not roses, not speeches, just consistent grace." Fallon opened his mouth again, then closed it. He looked off camera, then at Keanu, as if unsure whether the show was still happening, or if they had all wandered somewhere deeper than prime time. "Do you ever think," Jimmy finally asked, "that maybe you became one of those people for others?" Keanu smiled faintly. "The first one in minutes. I think, if I did, it's only because I met enough people who didn't need a stage to matter." He paused. "They saved me, even when I didn't know I needed saving." From the audience, a woman called out softly, unscripted, unrehearsed. "Thank you." Keanu turned his head gently toward the voice, met her eyes and nodded. That was it. No grandeur, just truth answering truth. Behind the scenes, the director whispered into the earpiece of a stage assistant. "We're off script now." The assistant didn't respond. Fallon finally gathered himself and turned to the camera, his voice more reverent than rehearsed. "We'll be right back," he said quietly, but the audience didn't clap, didn't cheer. They didn't need to. In that stillness, in that one sentence, something sacred had occurred. Television had blinked and found itself human. The credits rolled early that night. No game segments, no musical guest, no closing jokes, just silence. Unusual, profound. The final camera shot lingered on Keanu's face a few seconds longer than protocol. Allowed, then faded into black. Backstage, Fallon walked beside him quietly, cue cards forgotten, rhythm broken. He wasn't the host anymore. Just a man walking with another man who had just bared something sacred. "I don't know what to say," Jimmy finally whispered. Keanu offered a gentle smile, not the kind made for cameras, just one born from stillness. "Then don't," he said softly. Some moments deserve to echo. Around them, stagehands and crew lined the walls, not out of obligation, but respect. Someone clapped once, then another. But it never built. It wasn't applause. It was reverence. Keanu offered a small bow of the head, hand to heart. Then he slipped out a side door before anyone could ask for a picture, or a comment, or a quote. The city outside was pulsing as always. Honking horns, neon reflections rippling in puddles, the buzz of Friday night. But Keanu didn't hail a car. He walked, hands tucked in coat pockets, gaze low. Somewhere the world was already reacting. Clips were surfacing, titles like "Keanu's one sentence leaves Fallon speechless" and "The moment that silenced the crowd" splashed across feeds. Millions of views within hours. Reaction videos, think pieces, tributes. But Keanu didn't open his phone. Instead, he caught a train out of the city. The next morning, long before sunrise, he stood in front of a modest, two-story home on the outskirts of Queens. The porch light flickered and an old wind chime danced in the breeze. A few planters sat cracked on the steps. He knocked gently. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 30s, wearing an oversized hoodie and warm eyes that held a quiet kind of fatigue. "Are you?" she started, eyes widening slightly. Keanu nodded. "You're Guillermo's daughter?" She paused, the name hitting her chest like a sudden wind. "Yes." He reached into his coat, pulling out a small folded envelope. "He talked about you. When I was a kid actor in Toronto. He brought me coffee every morning." She took the letter slowly. "He used to bring me sandwiches when I stayed up late, studying. He couldn't say thermodynamics, but he tried so hard to read my textbooks anyway." Keanu smiled. "He was proud of you." "I never thought anyone remembered him," she whispered. "I did." A beat of silence passed. Then she gestured. "Would you like to come in?" Inside, the house was clean but lived in. Books lined one wall. A small photograph of Guillermo in a blue work shirt sat on a shelf beside a flickering candle. Keanu stood before it. "He's the reason I treat everyone on set like they matter. Because he did." She said nothing, but her eyes shimmered. When he finally left, he pressed a small envelope into her hand. "For his grave, if you don't mind." She nodded, unable to speak. That afternoon, Keanu stopped by a grocery store in Los Feliz. He walked through the aisles slowly, filling a cart not for himself, but for an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Vogel, widowed. Arthritic, once an extra in a silent film. He rang her bell just before sunset. "Oh, Keanu," she said, smiling. "I told you I didn't need anything." He placed the bags gently on her kitchen counter. "And I didn't listen. That's the secret to being a good man. I ignore women politely." She laughed, her hand finding his arm. "Do you want to stay for tea?" she asked. He nodded. "Only if you still have those ginger cookies." That night they sat at her table as she told him stories from the 40s, about days when movie stars wore gloves and heartbreak was handwritten. He listened, as if every word were scripture. Later he stood beneath a sycamore tree in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. He carried no flowers, just the envelope Guillermo's daughter had returned to him, still unopened. He placed it at the base of a small stone that read, "Guillermo Alvarez, 1962-2001. He worked so she could dream." Keanu knelt for a moment, not to pray, just to be still, the kind of stillness he spoke about, the kind that hears everything the world forgets to say. He walked home slowly. That night in his apartment, he sat at his desk with the window open. The city hummed beyond the glass, but he heard only the wind rustling the curtains. He picked up a notebook, leather-bound. Worn inside were only a few pages, but each one had a name and a memory. Elijah. "Do you think heaven has time?" Guillermo. "One coffee every day, Mom. Sewing late, never asking why." He turned to a blank page, then wrote, Legacy is not what follows your name. It's what quietly grows in the spaces where you chose to love. He paused, then added, silence is sometimes the loudest legacy. The next morning, before the sun could fully rise, Keanu drove to a lake just outside the city. It was still fogged over when he arrived. Thin, mist curling like smoke over water, he sat on a bench worn by weather and time, wrapped in his coat, hands clasped between his knees. He watched as the first light spilled across the water, soft amber, brushing gently against the horizon. No one knew he was there. No one took a photo. There were no hashtags, no flashing lights, no applause, just a man